One other thinking model that I learned early on in my trainer careers is the self-determination theory, which basically says there's these three basic needs that everybody has: autonomy, competency, and belonging. Autonomy, what that means in the work environment from a leadership perspective is that you don't micromanage people. Belonging, having this sense of being connected to a team, this sense of belonging within the group. And then competency, which would basically mean allowing everybody to bring in their competency and have this sense of competency, and also offering opportunities to develop competencies.
Today, we're diving into what it means to run a global team effectively. Managing remote teams isn't always smooth sailing. There are hurdles like navigating time zones, fostering meaningful communication, and building a strong company culture across borders. But when done right, it can unlock incredible innovation and impact. My two inspiring guests today are from MetaFox EU, a company dedicated to empowering personal and professional growth through emotional intelligence. MetaFox has gained international recognition for its groundbreaking coaching tools, earning silver at the 2024 European Training Awards, with values rooted in trust, personal growth, and impactful work. They have mastered building a thriving, people-centered remote team. We have Tobias Weghorn, co-founder of MetaFox EU, and his colleague Justin Haguisan, who brings valuable insights from the Philippines. So, whether you're managing a remote workforce, planning to build one, or looking for opportunities in this space, this episode is absolutely for you. So, let's jump in. I am your host, Norbert Elnar, and welcome to the Making a Masterpiece podcast. Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Making a Masterpiece. Today we are joined by two amazing people. I've been really looking forward to this conversation because we're going to discuss what it really means to run a global team. I'm not just saying that for the sake of a topic, but this guys really nailed it. I know it would be very helpful for our community to learn the best practices on how to run a global team. Joining me today is Tobias Weghorn and Justin Haguisan. Hi guys, welcome to our show.
Hey Norbert, great to be here.
Great to be here, Norbert.
Well, guys, Toby is actually joining us from Germany and Justin is joining us from the Philippines. So this setup already gives us how this kind of works. My first question would be, just to kick things off, perhaps you could share a bit about yourselves and your journey with MetaFox and tell our viewers how you came to be where you are today and what you find most rewarding about working as part of a global team.
Yeah, so at MetaFox, we are a e-commerce company on the one hand and also a psychology publisher. So we build tools, mostly card sets that help coaches, psychotherapists to have more meaningful conversation, to get to the core of the issues and to build meaningful connection. We've been doing that in our founders team, coming all from an engineering background, which is somewhat unusual, but all of us have some strong connection to psychology, to personal development that we've built early. In my case, that's already started during my early civil service. So in Germany, we used to have civil service as a replacement for military service. That meant after school, before going into studies, I served 9 months in a home for mentally disordered people in the work therapy. And that's when I first got in touch with mental health as a theme, and also with the social sector in general. That was a super useful experience for me. A few years after that, my father was diagnosed with manic depression, which also accompanied us for more than 10 years. And of course, a significant part of my life and the entire family. That's why, despite studying engineering, I got very much interested in psychology early on. During our studies, we started a local chapter of an international student organization, the Board of European Students of Technology, in short BEST, which used to be and still is a big organization in Europe with 90 chapters all over European universities. And Max, Chrissy, and I, we've all been co-founders of MetaFox also. We started during our studies a local chapter of that organization at our university, which meant we had to do all the things that you also do as a company founders. We had to make the organization known on campus. We had to build relationships to companies for them to sponsor us, to sponsor our activities. We had to build systems. How do we want to communicate internally? How do we want to present ourselves to the world? So all these questions that you face when working with a company, we tackled during our studies. And that was a super empowering experience because it was this sort of risk-free environment where we could just try. Worst case, the organization would just cease to exist after a few years. But it didn't actually. A few years ago, we went to the 10-year anniversary and it still was there. Just seeing that impact gave us this sense of self-efficacy. We saw, okay, we started this and it actually lasted. That I think was a very empowering experience. And it was also in that organization where Max and I were trained as trainers. One of the main activities of the organization was to attend international events, doing complementary education. So basically gathering a bunch of engineering students in the room. You wouldn't discuss differential equations or cogwheels. Instead, you would talk about team dynamics, communication, leadership, and all these things. Once we were a bit more experienced in the organization, started facilitating these sort of events. So we did this train the trainer experience, train the trainer education there, which I think was quite a transformational point in our lives for all of us. That's also where I met Joanna, my girlfriend, co-founder of MetaFox, and my wife today. This organization and the life in there was super defining for me as a person, but also for MetaFox and how we do things today. It really shaped us.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that story behind the MetaFox history. That's very inspiring to think that it came out of natural progression and your love for team coaching just grew and grew deep. Justin, how about you? What brought you to this journey and what is rewarding about working with a global team like MetaFox?
I think the most rewarding thing when it comes to working, not just for MetaFox, but also for a global team, is the opportunities that are presented to you, which is sad for me to say, wouldn't be available in the country normally, as well as the corporate cultural exposure that I get to when it comes to working with not just the foreign individual, but also like working and growing as almost becoming like a local employee towards that employer. Like if I have an American employer, I become like an American employee and vice versa for them. For MetaFox, one of the best things I've ever gotten is being part of the environment where there's equal opportunities for growth, support. There's just a firm balance between being able to work and then also learning at the same time. Because here, we're not only taught to focus on one role, but we're also taught to go into other roles, do other things. I'm not just the writer. I'm also going to be asked to do a lot of other things well beyond my responsibilities. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's giving me a chance to explore what I need to do to grow further.
I heard this very famous line that says, talent is equal, but opportunity is not. I totally get that idea. I mean, for example, in the Philippines, there's always that thin line between opportunity and growth in terms of workforce and what we are exposed to, even being exposed to working with multicultural teams and opening yourself up to different cultures and work ethics really broadens your horizon. Now, Toby, we've talked about your journey in MetaFox. My curiosity is on this topic. What made you decide to integrate a remote work setup, a multicultural team? You have a lot of team members in the Philippines. Why did you do that?
I owe a lot to Max, my co-founder. He always has been the organization builder. As I mentioned, I was mainly motivated, at least in the early days of MetaFox, by this desire to create and desire to make an impact in mental health and meaningful work. I focused a lot on our products, while Max was already back in the student NGO days, and then also at MetaFox thinking, I would say, much more entrepreneurial. I would use that language today, even though we didn't use it back then, but he was interested in building this community, empowering other people. At the same time, we were always thinking very international, coming from this international organization, having Joanna on the team who didn't speak German at that time. So from day one, we were on the one hand functioning entirely in English on an organizational level. And also we're all living in different places throughout Germany and Europe. So basically we really started working remote from day one in 2018 already, basically using Slack to communicate, using Asana to manage our tasks. So when then Max came across these resources, if you want to build an e-commerce business, then look in the Philippines, there's great talent that you can pay good money without, also as a very young company who doesn't have money, essentially, for European standards. So we could have never afforded at that time to hire someone in Germany. I mean, we wouldn't even be paying money ourselves from the company. But we were able to afford acceptable salary, at least, to our first employee in the Philippines. And when she joined, we were essentially at first looking for someone to help us with administering Amazon listings and doing virtual assistant jobs, I would say, which is very common in this outsourcing sector. But as Max was coming very much from this, let us build an organization, let us build a community, we didn't do this with an outsourcing mindset, I would say. But we were also interested in the development, in the growth of these people. On the one hand, because we loved it, and this was sort of our passion, our mission, because we also had experienced this personal growth opportunity in that student NGO ourselves. But also, of course, because it's a business necessity. If we want to build great psychology tools, then our team members, even though the whole mental health, personal development sector might be less developed in the Philippines, it's still required for them to know about the sector and go through this personal growth themselves. And that's also why early on we invested in sending people to training events, so they also get this seminar experience and what does it mean actually to talk about group dynamics on a personal level, to use non-violent communication. This is why we would very early on think about MetaFox not as a bunch of guys in Germany who do outsourcing, but as a remote organization who functions as one organism, even though it's spread out all over the world.
That's a very interesting point there. You just mentioned the difference between the outsourcing mentality and remote collaboration work. I will get back to you on that, Toby, but I just want to ask Justin first. Justin, when we hear the term outsourcing, it is not new to us in the Philippines. Based on your experience, what are the most common misconceptions or reservations you've encountered regarding global collaboration or remote work? Or what are the misconceptions about this kind of jobs for you being employed and for the one who is also collaborating across the oceans?
That is a great question, and I think this question in itself deserves its own episode, but I'll try to keep it as short as possible. One of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to outsourcing is the term itself, which is outsourcing. When somebody hires us for a job, they're basically paying us to do a portion of what they don't want to do personally for work. So, for example, somebody doesn't want to go through the slog of putting up 100 Amazon listings, and so he hires a virtual assistant to do just that for him. Pay him for a month to upload all the listings according to standards. And I think that it's one of those things where, and I say that it's a misconception because on my end, as a Filipino employee, it's one of those things where just because somebody asks me to do these Amazon listings, I immediately thought, okay, this is just what I'm going to be doing. I don't think the contractor or the employer is requiring me to do something else. Otherwise, he'd pay me more money and so on. Meanwhile, for the foreigners, their misconception here is not all the Filipinos might be tech savvy, to say the least. So they usually are very cautious when it comes to approaching somebody like, hey, just because let's say we're the Philippines, we don't have Amazon here. So it's understandable that somebody from the Western culture would know that we know what Amazon is. But their initial misconception is we don't have Amazon here. We don't know anything about it. It's one of those things where it's surprising for a lot of foreigners. I speak from experience where I've had people talk to me about, do you have any experience with this software or this platform? I'm familiar with that. How do you know about that? Well, our country's not that far behind. We are aware of the technology. Even though we don't have Amazon here, it pays to be familiar with what it offers. We have our shopping platforms here like Lazada or Shopee, and that gives the new generation of VAs a chance or a sneak peek at what Amazon is when they end up working for somebody who hires for them for Amazon work.
Introducing Masterpiece Kingdom Brand's free brand assessment guide, Future Proof Your Brand. In just 10 minutes, complete a quick and insightful assessment with 35 key questions designed to help you take an honest look at your brand and gauge its future resilience and adaptability. Discover valuable insights in 5 essential areas: brand digitalization, brand online presence, brand resilience, customer experience, and brand culture. Once you finish the assessment, we'll send you a report detailing your score so you can identify where your brand can truly grow. The best part is, this assessment is completely free. Don't fear the future. Take the step to transform your insights into action. Take our free Future Proof Your Brand assessment guide and join other kingdom-minded leaders who are already using it to elevate their brands. Visit masterpiecebrands.com/course/futureproof and start future-proofing your brand today. So good to hear. You know what? I still sometimes get comments of like, oh, you're from the Philippines. How can you speak so good English? I'm like, no, me no English good. Yeah, I just make a joke because I'm like, guys, I don't think people understand. They're not familiar. I'm so happy to hear that being a Filipino here in Germany, it makes me also really proud that we are in that level of excellence and that competence that we can really work globally. And speaking of excellence, I think this is a question a lot of employers also have with having remote teams. I have a small remote team, not just in the Philippines. I also have people in South Africa and in other parts of the world that I collaborate with. To me, excellence is an important aspect of culture. So, Toby, my question would be, how do you maintain alignment and that level of excellence and effective collaborations across different time zones with your global team? As you said, what I love about your company is that you invest in your people, that they're just not task oriented, but they're actually immersed in actual work. How do you overcome that pain point of different time zones, like communication or language barriers?
First of all, we always hired for what we called cultural fit, work with people who have this values alignment. In our case, for example, have this strong interest in personal development, have somewhat a background or interest in psychology or competency in e-commerce. I would say this cultural fit is much more important than competency because we believe that people can learn anything and that skills can be trained. They also need to be trained because just as Justin pointed out earlier, we originally hired him as a blog post writer where he had brought a lot of experience. But nowadays, he's also helping me with the podcast that we are just launching right now, expanding his sphere of competency. And that will always continue like that, right? We will have to keep learning, but the foundation on which we built this is this cultural fit. And this cultural fit, as you talked about the Philippines, that is also something that I found to be great in the Philippines, actually. Working with freelancers from India and Pakistan, surprisingly, was more difficult for me. And the Philippines also being a colony of Spain and today essentially being strongly influenced by the US. I think the Filipino people are also a culture that, of all Asian cultures that I got to know, have this diverse mix of cultural backgrounds that make it easy also for me as a German or European to actually connect. That also just as a practical advice for anyone listening, I think the Philippines are a great place and great people to work with. And now, much more practically, what do we do to make this remote thing work.
Yes.
I think there's a bunch of organizational habits that we have, and that is making this whole connecting on a human level a actual intention, right? Because if we were to sit in one office, that would happen naturally. You would just come in, have a coffee, and we would just chat instead of only talking about work. If you switch to go online and you're only going into Zoom meetings, it's much more task oriented at first because you meet to solve a certain problem. But you need to consciously make room for this personal check-in. A podcast guest that I had recently phrased it as connect before act as a practice. What we do practically is that we have these check-ins in the beginning of every meeting. So a short warm-up exercise where you would, for example, pick a picture that represents how you're doing today or how your week is going. And that gives room to share that stuff that is not work related, that is more how are you doing on an emotional level, and do that in sort of a playful way. So you can be there as a full person and not only as the human resource that is here to do a certain job or fulfill a certain task. So consciously make room for that.
Wow, that's so good. It just doesn't breaks the ice because it's a little bit personal, but it actually gives you the chance to know the person better, and it makes you connect. Justin, Dobie mentioned that you guys have company habits that encourage you in your remote work to keep everybody on the same page and excellence. Do you have like a favorite company habit that you really, really like?
Yeah, I think one of the best things I love is the check-ins. They're really good. It's very rare for employers to check in with their teams, not just on a professional level, but also somewhat on a personal level. Because it's work, our mind has to be for work. We're in a work meeting, so we have to talk about work 100% of the time. This 3-hour meeting will be about work. For MetaFox, there's intention, as will be said, to connect with people. We get in touch with one another to build the team. Just because we work online doesn't mean we don't have to know what's going on with the other person. Somebody could sound well on Slack, but in reality is not okay. And it's hard to decipher a person's well-being just by reading what they say on WhatsApp or Slack. So I think this is one of my favorite habits.
That's so good to hear. What I love about you guys is that you really walk the talk, MetaFox, you're known for being this coaching tool, focusing on mental health care and effective teams. And I love that you guys are able to really sort of crack the code applying this remotely. And I think to end our conversation, I would love to ask both of you, in the excellent remote work that you do and the global collaboration, is there any practical leadership action that you can share with our listeners that they can immediately apply into their business, whether they are doing it remotely or doing it in person?
I think for me, it's just empathy and awareness. This is really good to start, whether you're a leader in a remote company or just somebody doing administrative tasks. It's important to really understand the person, who they are, what they could be going through, and be aware of how you could position yourself into helping them and allowing them to help you as well. I think those are just at the top of my head would be a good start for either a foreign boss looking to outsource or somebody looking for work who's looking for a outsourcing job.
Empathy and awareness. I like that. Toby.
Yeah, +1 to Justin, definitely. And I think one other thinking model that I learned early on in my trainer careers is the self-determination theory, which basically says there's these 3 basic needs that everybody has: autonomy, competency, and belonging. Autonomy basically means that I can decide how I do things and what to do. Of course, you always need to balance it. The world is a gray place, not black and white. Basically, what that means in the work environment from a leadership perspective is that you don't micromanage people. You let them work from where and when they want, and also solve a problem in the way they believe they can solve it best. So I think as a leader, what I learned is also to sort of go up this levels of delegation from, okay, this is the task that we need to be done. This is step 1, step 2, step 3. This is how you solve it. I think sometimes there's a place for this. I'm not saying this is always wrong, but for me as a leader, it's of course nicer or easier to just say, look, there's the goal on the horizon. This is where we want to go. The team member can then also autonomously decide and really have this autonomy of how do I get there and how do we get there together. That is, of course, this other aspect that I mentioned, right? Autonomy and belonging, having this sense of being connected to a team, this sense of belonging within the group. I think that is also super important, where I can be there as a whole person and not only as a human resource. And then thirdly, we said competency, which would basically mean allowing everybody to bring in their competency and have this sense of competency, and also offering opportunities to develop competencies. So sending people on training events, having this flexibility in roles that you can grow into, make room for learning on a continuous basis.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. That has been an amazing time with you. And I think our listeners really got so much value from that. It just makes me excited as well about the possibilities of what global collaboration remote work could do, because we can really accomplish so much in that. So guys, I know you've done this a lot of times with your clients and the practices that you do in your business. Can you invite our listeners to deeper conversation with you? Where can they find you and how can they connect with you?
Yeah, so we are MetaFox. You can go on metafox.eu and find plenty of resources. These check-ins that we talked about, we also make them available for free as downloadables or as templates for Miro in case you're using that. You can also bring this to your own work environment.
Yes, that would be my challenge to all our masterpiece makers out there. If you are a leader or a business owner and you just want to really try this approach, getting to know your people more, go to metafox.eu, download that check-in. Was it called check-in? Is it a PDF?
Yeah, there's a bunch of things. There's images that you can then, on a scale of animal, how are you doing today? This sort of also semi-fun, light stuff that you can download as a PNG or also as templates for Miro.
So guys, go to their website, download this check-in resource. We'll put it also in the link below in the show notes so that you can access them. Thank you so much, Justin and Toby, for joining our Masterpiece Makers today. And thank you to all our listeners. You know that we love you, we honor you. We're here because we're very passionate to build your faith and inspire your business. Till the next episode, goodbye.